The EnAlgae pilot network consists of 9 pilot sites, 3 of which are dealing with macroalgae, including ourselves, Queen's University, and 6 of which are dealing with microalgae. So the sites are located at various locations all across Northwest Europe, and the sites then will take in a variety of different environmental conditions, different sites with levels of different infrastructure, different technologies, and hopefully then we'll be able to share our data and compare really the differences in growing macro and microalgae across the whole Northwest Europe region.
The ultimate aim of the EnAlgae project is to try and develop the best practices and the best methods for generating sustainable algal biomass for bioenergy production.
The research we're doing here at Queen's is looking at optimising growth of kelp for biofuel generation. So we're taking juvenile germlings of kelps and then transferring them out to our long lines. We have a seaweed farm out at sea where we grow them on long rope lines, and we're seeing what the optimal conditions are for transferring them from our lab culture to our farm.
The EnAlgae project here at Queen's decided to get involved with the local Maritime festival, which is going on between Portaferry, where our research lab is based, and also Strangford, which incorporates a larger part of the local area. We are a major sponsor of the festival, and we think it's really important that we get out and explain to local people exactly what it is that we're doing. We want people to understand when they go out and they see the boys in the loch what it is that they're there for, to appreciate the fact that this is something that could be a major benefit to them in the future, and hopefully to try and change people's mindsets about the sources of energy and different places that we can actually get energy from. Usually people are quite surprised when we start talking about getting energy from seaweed, so as much education, communication that we can get with local people is extremely important to us, so the festival is just a great opportunity to do that.
It's been wonderful for us in that we're able to take people into the lab, whereas we wouldn't otherwise necessarily be able to take as many people in, but we've had a great number of people coming through, and we're able to take people out onto the long lines and see the boats and see the lines that we've got there and the seaweed that's growing, and they've been really interested in it, and so far they've been enjoying it.
Queen's University is one of 3 macroalgae pilot sites. We are involved in growing large seaweeds, the kelps, and we do that in conjunction with Galway University down there, and we also work with SEVA in Brittany. All of us are doing the same experiments, which basically goes from collecting seaweed on the beach, which is fertile. We bring it back to the lab and we grow it in flasks. And we can actually contain the seaweeds and bulk them up to quite high quantities from very small amounts of wild seaweed. So we're using all natural seaweeds from our local areas respectively. We'll grow these up in the hatchery that you see we're standing in now. And once they're of suitable size, we can take them out into the sea and actually deploy them onto long lines. And that's where they'll grow then to their full potential. They grow very small in the hatchery, but once they're out on the long lines, we have seen growth of greater than a metre in 3 to 4 months. The biomass will then bulk up to harvest time, which usually occurs about June, July, and we'll then go out, harvest all of our material, which we can then test for its viability as a biofuel.
Seaweed do the same thing in water effectively as trees do on land. So the environmental impact of growing seaweeds in coastal areas can be thought of as equivalent in some ways to the environmental impact of growing trees or plants on land. There's a right way of doing it and a wrong way of doing it. And what we would like to do is actually bring benefit to the coast by growing seaweed in a way that will actually support other life around where we're growing the seaweed, in the same way that, say, planting a tree raises biodiversity in the area the trees have been planted.
Also, having seaweeds in the water, if you have large growth, you have the potential to change the temperature or change the water flow, but it's something that we are looking at the moment to determine to what extent that happens. And they can also provide an artificial habitat or an improved habitat for lots of aquatic animals. So around our eco-anchors, we're hoping that we can improve that. It can provide increased nursery ground for fish. So we're hoping that it'll have as much of a beneficial impact as possible.
Northern Ireland, and in fact Ireland, Scotland and the west coast of Wales and England are potentially very good markets for algal biomass because they have a lot of it. Kelps grow very well on rocky shores, and the areas that I just mentioned have a lot of rocky shore, so grow a lot of kelp. It grows very well in those areas.
We do have a great resource here for growing the seaweed. We are working with a local company at the moment, a local fisherman, and he's been wonderful in engaging with us, and hopefully if we're able to diversify the fishing industries, then we can improve that. We can get the fishermen and the loch users to work with us, and then there's a good ground in there for setting up a market, and people seem to be quite keen to be interested, and hopefully so far they've been interested in buying biodiesel or bioenergy coming from seaweed eventually.
So when it comes to making a sustainable algae to energy market across the whole of Northwest Europe, we really need a lot of collaboration. It's absolutely key to making sure that this works. We need collaboration between researchers. Researchers need to be able to share the talents that they have, the facilities that they have, to generate good data, to show that actually growing micro and macroalgae is economically viable and produces a good enough quality of biofuel. It will also help to develop technologies and make sure that we're producing things as optimally as we can. That then could feed into government. So then a bit of collaboration between our researchers and government. Government can then influence policy and start to really include things like growing seaweed, microalgae facilities also within policies. And once we have that, the network's really in place for us to start doing this on a much larger scale.
The work's important because, largely because the world is running out of petrol. Petrol is fossil fuels are the single largest source of both energy and also of feedstocks for synthetic chemicals, so things like polyester are all made from petroleum products. What we as a society are going to need to do over the next few generations is to replace that single large source of energy and chemicals with a number of diverse strands to support both energy and chemical production. And one possible strand is biomass, biofuels. So the importance of the work in EnAlgae is really looking to develop or diversify a source of material that can be used for both energy and chemical production. And I should say that there will be, or it is likely that, we will need to integrate that with other forms of renewable energy, such as wind or solar or tidal.
So projects like EnAlgae also help because they really help to speed up the process of developing these new sustainable energy sources. If it wasn't for the collaboration between all of these different partners, this is something that could take decades, whereas we're using projects like EnAlgae that could significantly speed up the process, that we might be using seaweeds for biofuel within the next sort of 10 to 20 years.